Voltaire, like, mate, they're having church burnings every week. He's done nothing.
No. Well, the only reason he's doing it is to, because he's frightened that Le Pen or the what is it? It's no longer called the Front National. It's called, they've renamed the party again, but they are still doing quite well in the polls. And Macron is, Macron isn't. I'll say, we're live now as well.
Are we now? Oh, hello.
Yeah, we're live now. And I'm obviously this week. This is episode. What's it? Episode 10. And Damn Joggers edition. Yes, I call it the Damned Joggers edition. We're going to obviously talk about Starkey in this at some point. And this week we've got 2 new guests appearances on this show. First of all, I'm joined by Mitch. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And I'm also going to be joined by Ferro from the Foundations podcast, but he shall be on probably in about 20-30 minutes time. But so he'll be on, and of course, because we've had Owain, we've had a lot of Welsh appearance on this show. Yeah, and so I think now is the time to purge the Celts.
Yes.
From this show, it's just getting too much now. Especially the way Wales is behaving, like going full East Germany. It's like no. Stop voting Labour. Vote anybody. Just
stop voting Plaid Cymru. That.
To be fair, Owain, he's like stuck in the Clyde area, so I feel really sorry for him because he's insufferable. Imagine, he must have neighbours and people that like lives with who are because he pretty much where he lives is either you're a Conservative or you're applied. So it's like Boomer Celt.
That is depressing.
It is. As I said, I feel really sorry for him. But so this week, enough about Owain. He can stay in his in the communist hellhole that
in his hovel.
Yes, and so this week we are, as I put out on Twitter earlier, we're going to be talking about Twitter censorship. We're going to be talking about David Starkey, and we're going to be talking about what else will we talk about? Oh yeah, and Amy Comey Barrett, is that her name?
Amy Comey Barrett, yeah.
Amy Comey Barrett, yeah, and
nobody in America calls them like Amy Barrett. It's Comey Barrett. Obviously, the third name and second name. Like, is it necessary? Because we don't call Boris all however many names he's got. It
was like Alexander Boris Krefeffel Johnson or something like that. So,
yeah, Tristan.
Yes. So no, we don't call him that because that'd be ridiculous. So we're going to be talking about her, and there's a fun sort of side story to this background story. Several weeks ago, I was on Laugh at the Guardian, and Pharaoh's just joined. Hello, Pharaoh.
Hi, guys.
Hi there. I was just saying, with Amy Comey Barrett, I was on Laugh at the Guardian stream with Harry and Staff Sergeant Sniper, and Staff Sergeant Sniper made the prediction that they would bring up, they would sort of accuse her of basically rape, like they did with Brett Kavanaugh, and I laughed at the time and said, "What? That's crazy. Sure, that's even crazier than the Dems. They would never go for something like that because that's just too insane." And lo and behold, they did.
Well, they phrased it as a question.
Yeah, they did. Which, just asking, have you ever sexually assaulted anybody? Which is, this is the thing. By the left's own definition, women can't technically rape, men anyway. So again, it's interesting the way that it was worded. But of course, Sergeant Sniper proved us all wrong, because we didn't think they would even go down that route, but obviously they did. So that would be someone sent me a clip, so that'll be a fun one to look at. But I guess sort of a breaking news alert, everyone. It's sort of gone on social media over the last couple of hours, but now the BBC have actually picked up on it, and this was a terror incident in the outside of a school, I believe, in Paris. Bring it up. Yes. So what has happened is according to various news sites, that a teacher from the school was beheaded in a unknown attack, but the BBC have obviously they've now gone down the Islamist terrorism.
Forgot the background information.
Well, I think the guy shouted out "Allahu Akbar" didn't he, as part of the attack, and from what I've read, the teacher was showing depictions of Muhammad. So I guess it's related to that. But
yes,
obviously the investigation is still undergoing. It could be anything, guys.
It could be anything. It could be, as we said, it could be radical Protestants. It could be radical atheists. It could be radical Catholics. It could be
exactly.
Anything. You can't jump to.
In Arabic, obviously, though. I mean,
yes. Well, I say radical Catholics. I mean, given the latest antics of the Pope, I mean, it probably could be. But
Jack the Papacy.
Yes, and so.
Yeah, I think this whole story is really, very sad. Like France continues to be a centre for Islamic terrorism, and I just can't see an end in sight. I think this also plays into, I don't know if you saw some of the stuff around Macron and homeschooling, where he's banned homeschooling because of his concerns around almost Islamic separatists groups forming their own national identities in the country, and that's yeah. Well, it's quite an extreme reaction to that. But I think again, as a country, they very much focused on a non-multicultural agenda. So again, in somewhere like England and America, there is kind of core ideas of what it is to be British. Well, this is supposedly, and then within that you can have a matrix of peoples. But in France, it's very much like you're French. We will turn you into French people. But
it doesn't look like they've done a very particularly good job of it. In fact, it seems like they've embraced the opposite.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think what people are sort of waking up to is that obviously, unsurprisingly, religion is a core part of cultural identity, and I'm not sure.
Unless you're Albanian, then it's not.
Well, yeah. Well, like, again, obviously, certain interpretations are flexible enough that you can do, but obviously, it's there's definite problems. If you see things like the number of church fires in France, etc., which could or could not be related. I don't want to say for sure, but France is a real problem, and I don't know if doing things like banning homeschooling is going to be enough to, fundamentally fix it.
Yeah, I noticed also. I mean, there's another thing when it comes to. I think France has a very difficult difficult relation when it comes to religion, because one of the things that the French government and French society likes to pride itself on is that it's a deep secularized nation. And one of the first nations to be secularized, in the sense that you could trace it back to obviously the revolution and then the period after Bonaparte and such. And so I think when they can treat Christianity and Judaism in a way that they think, it's not like we can be French, but this sort of thing is like a private sort of behind closed curtains, sort of religion. But then when they invite, you have people from, because I imagine most of them are from North Africa, like former French colonies in North Africa, and then the social attitude of religion around there is dramatically different than what the average French population is taught. And so you see this I think you're seeing like with France, especially like if you look back at Charlie Hebdo and everything, and the massacre there, it was like a massive culture clash between effectively the sort of Western idea that sort of secularization of where religion isn't the core part of the society, and where it's sort of just down to the individual, and then you have a religion which is it's based purely on society and the nationhood, and so you have this sort of almighty clash between the two. And the trouble is, I think with that, I don't see how it can be really reconciled one way, because they're just two opposites of the extremes.
Yeah, like from my perspective, I think with the kind of secularization of France, what they've thought they've done is to remove religion, but they still have a kind of religion. Something that someone like Mulberg would say is like a extreme form of Protestantism with God removed. But they
Catholicism, wouldn't it? Not Protestantism.
What? Sorry.
It'll be Catholicism, not Protestantism, because they killed most of them and exiled the rest.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess in terms of like the kind of secular Enlightenment nature is like traditionally thought of as derived from Protestant ideas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so, what's it called? You have is it Deists?
The Deists.
Yeah, that sort of belief where you believe in a god, just not along deep theocratic sort of lines of Catholicism, Protestant. You just believe in a god. Sort of like, I guess you would say, the Freemasons, because I mean, if to be a Freemason you have to believe in a god, doesn't mean, I mean, it's the god of the Christian interpretation of God, or the Jewish, or the Muslim, or I mean, I guess you could class maybe Buddhism in that. I don't know what the definite, but the sort of Enlightenment deitism of the concept of God, and I mean, because I think even Napoleon, he wasn't, I think technically Catholic, but he was along the line of a deist in many ways.
Yeah, and I guess what people have forgotten is that actually, these ideas do have like religious foundations. Even the way that they think about, even the word secular comes from the seculum, which is a Christian concept, and fundamentally, even though it claims to be without Christianity, it's sort of steeped in all of this ideology. And then all of a sudden, it said, okay, well, because we don't follow a god, any religion's fine. But I think fundamentally what they've forgotten is that they, like I said, they are a kind of religion, not necessarily believing in God, and then they've allowed another religious people to try and integrate. But you still have that clash fundamentally, and again, especially with Islam, which is very much more than just a religion in the sense that we think about it in terms of metaphysical beliefs, but it's a legal and political system. It's a very much every single part of your life. So it's very much a clash of religions in my mind, and I think they think that they can fit Islam within their form of secular religion, but I think it's not. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a fundamental clash, which means it's never going to work.
It's the same sort of concept, I guess, you would have Americans when they talk about the freedom of religion, because if you think about it, same concept. It was about the various. It works within the Christian Jewish sects, which are part of the society. So you take, say, with France at that time when they went through that period when they start secularizing, you had obviously the dominant Roman Catholic Church, but then you would have various Protestant groups, and one could argue, well, because because they are part of the French society, they were the religious groups that were born within France itself. And it's rooted, even each Protestant group, whether it's the oh god, I forgot what the ones that were I've got it
Well, the
completely.
Huguenots.
Yeah,
The Huguenots, the Huguenots, or the like the Swiss Reform lot. It all was created and formed and built up by French, within French communities, within the French people themselves. And of course, they would have their influences back from early Christianity through the Catholic period and everything. And then, as you said, the problem with the arrival of the Islamic religion, is that it doesn't integrate because it doesn't fit within French society. I mean, because if you look at the foundations, of the historical foundations between the relationships between the two, the first known contact was at the Battle of Tours in the 8th century. And so there is, and that's, I mean, with Charles Martel and such. And so there is quite a deep-rooted historical difference between the two. And so, yes, I think the problem is that it goes back to really the Enlightenment. Is that the Enlightenment? People forget the Enlightenment only happened just because we had colonies in Africa and India doesn't, and others, doesn't mean the Enlightenment happened on the same scale that it happened in the West. Because in many ways it didn't. I think if you take the Enlightenment, technological wise, the world benefited, especially the colonies. But when you come to the actual sort of cultural, political, and religious level, it had very little effect outside the West. And hence, when, as we said, clash of cultures happening daily, because I think there was this great thing that was it was a Twitter exchange, and it was quite some time ago, but it was basically a debate about the right to offend. And you had this one Islamic chap who basically said, "Don't these French people understand that drawing an image of our prophet, our beloved prophet, is this it's greatly offensive and it really hurts." And you had one French chap who said, "Well, why? He's just a man." So you see this very two different worldviews, sort of like the materialist and the anti-materialist in many ways.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally that there is no way that I don't even want to say fundamentalist, but a standard reading of Islam will fit in French society. I think there are certainly liberal forms which it's possible to adopt, but from what I've seen, it's the amount of kind of liberalization in those communities. I mean, they're very good at transmitting religion from one generation to the next in a similar form. So I think France is playing, a race against time where they're trying to liberalize that part of the population so they can try and integrate, but I think it's ultimately a losing game, especially when you see the demographic changes in France. I mean, in Belgium, it's even more pronounced. There's an Islamic party formed for the first time, and I think as soon as you get those kind of group identities, there is no need to integrate anymore, and I think the problem's just going to be exacerbated. And again, what's interesting is specifically around there's a whole interesting area around depictions of Muhammad, just from like a etymological perspective, because it's kind of espoused like this is the truth, and this has always been the truth. But for certain Islamic groups and at certain points in time, depictions of Muhammad were allowed. So, for example, if you see a lot of Islamic Mongol texts, there's been several depictions, etc. So again, it's a lot of these truths have been espoused as universal within Islam, but that's just not the case historically. But that's sort of another issue entirely. But
I'd say we've raised on this channel Deobandism and Wahhabism as well, which are the two most destructive forms of Islam, and probably the one when it and people don't know, Wahhabism is a basically Arab nationalistic creed of Islam that's born out of Saudi Arabia, still prevalent today in Saudi Arabia, and of course Deobandism is what was born out of Pakistan, which was the anti-British creed. It was sort of anti-Western. It was opposed to anything that comes from the West. During the colonial period, of course, with India. So yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the individual who carried that out probably belonged to a sect of Wahhabism, because I believe most of them do, because it's, as I said, most extreme sect. And I think the European, if the European Union wants to do something, I think they need to look at some of the Islamic creeds that operate in Europe, because some of them are, if they were a political organization like Antifa or far right organizations, they would not be allowed to exist or operate with some of the stuff that's put out there. Sorry, Ferro, go on. Yes.
I just want to say that I think there's an interesting irony where that France sort of suffers from their Enlightenment values in this case, where again they're focused on equality. In their eyes, all religions are equal, or all people's values and views are equal, or have the same potence, and so that they've kind of like taken. Adopted this group in a very dramatic way, and then they're suffering from it. So they're sort of like a victim of their own ideological prism, in my mind.
It's their version of liberalism, you got to remember, because we're not like that, traditionally anyway.
No. No. And Antifa is an idea, man, yeah. And
I was just trying to think, while you were talking about, Islam and how do we reconcile all this stuff? And I just realized, well, it depends on the sect as well, because it's, like Christianity, there's hundreds of thousands of them. And the one sect in particular that I think they have actually integrated wherever they are, and that's the Bektashis. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, they are and they're the ones that are also quite heavily victims to radical Islamic attacks, especially from.
And I found Bektashi humour, by the way. Do you want to hear some jokes?
Go for it.
All right, I'll start with the second one on Wikipedia, because there's only 3. A Bektashi was a passenger in a rowing boat travelling from Eminönü to Üsküdar. Apologies for the bad Turkish, in Istanbul. When the storm blew up, the boatman tried to reassure him by saying, "Fear not, God is great." The Bektashi replied, "Yes, God is great, but the boat is small." And then this one here. A Bektashi was praying in the mosque while those around him were praying, "May God grant me faith." He muttered, "May God grant me plenty of wine." The Imam heard him and asked angrily why, instead of asking for faith like everyone else, he was asking God for something sinful. The Bektashi replied, "Well, everyone asks for what they don't have." And then there's the last one. An Imam was preaching about the evils of alcohol and asked, "If you put a pail of water and a pail of raki in front of a donkey, which one will he drink from?" Bektashi in the congregation immediately answered, "The water." "Indeed," said the Imam. "And why is that?" "Because he's an ass."
So, yeah.
Come on. That's like Yiddish humour.
Yeah, and Yeah, I've heard of them, and I mean they are probably the ones who are closely liberalized. But again, the question I don't know. I mean, I don't know much of their history of
Well, neither do I, to be honest.
where they
They're very
formed.
recent, though.
I think it revolves around like a neo messiah style figure. So and I think that's why they're so reviled. They're kind of like a bit maybe like the Mormons of Islam, where they have that like an additional revelation and an additional figure around them. And of course, Muhammad is described as the seal of the prophets. He is the last of the prophets to the world, and
Yeah,
so the idea of a new prophet is
heresy.
that's what
And
well that's what they would consider them not even to be Muslim, basically.
yeah, I was going to say I do know they're not considered to be Muslims, and they I think in the radical like ISIS mind they would probably be under the terminology pagan, because for them you have Jew, Christian, but then pagan, and that's it. So I imagine they'd be in.
Yeah, they drink, they eat pork.
Yeah,
I think it kind of reminds me of like kind of like the Stirner memes, egoism, those kind of jokes. That's what that humor reminds me of. Like they're kind of just flippant and aloof from all the mainstream of Middle Eastern religious thought, I guess.
yeah,
They're kind of rebels, but
yeah.
that's about as close as you'll ever. I think them and it's a Sufi sect, isn't it? So there's the Sufis who are a bit hippie, a bit love, oh, we just wanna pray, bro. We
Yeah.
want to be mystic, get close to God and all that. And then you got the Wahhabis, who are what are they, Sunni or Shia? I can't
The
remember.
Wahhabis are Sunni, and they're basically the Al Qaeda, the radical. They're Arab nationalists, national socialist types, but the Arab version.
Essentially, I mean, I think Hitler was allied with certain Muslim sects. I know that the
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
Caliph, what is it? What's not the Pope? What are they called? Of something of
Um,
well, something of Grand Mufti. That's it. The Grand
um,
Mufti of Jerusalem was his ally in the Middle
yeah, and
East.
also the Muslims of Bosnia. There were like several regiments born from Bosnian like SS Muslim
Yeah,
regiments. For those who don't know, there's legacy of the Ottoman Empire, but there's in Europe within the Balkans, Bosnia, what's now Bosnia and Albania, but in particularly Bosnia, while they are Slavic and sort of Caucasian, white European Slavic, but unlike their sort of Serb and Croats and sort of Macedonian neighbors and brothers, effectively, they are not Christian. They are in fact Muslim, and you also have ethnic Serb Christians living in there, and so of course that caused you had the conflict back in the 90s, and the various massacres and such. But yeah, I mean, when Hitler rolled in, he created entire division, and they were not I mean, from my knowledge, he never actively persecuted Muslims. In fact, he didn't. I don't think he even really said much about them. To be honest, he wasn't particularly negative about them.
no,
I'm not sure about that. I think that they were definitely like they had the kind of ethnicity scales or whatever.
Yeah.
They were not high on the list. Let's just say.
No,
But
they weren't high on the. Well, you see, from all I know, that he talks about like the Bosnian Muslims. I don't know. I mean, he probably has some view about Arabs and Turks and such. But from my knowledge, like with North Africa, for example, with the Rommel and such, the North African Corps had quite a lot of tribal Arab allies as well, which obviously helped him help them in North Africa.
I think we've got to be a little bit careful about looking at the realpolitik of war and ideology at the same time. But
yeah. And I was going to say, you got was it Whirling Dervishes? That was another one. That's a Turkish sect. Is that a sect of Islam, or is that like a?
that's part of Sufism.
That's part of Sufism, yeah. And I've seen whirling dervishes actually in Cyprus. So yep, so that was the other one that I was going to mention as well that I remember, because they just spin around in circles. It's actually rather interesting to watch, to be honest. But yeah. So one of the other news stories we're going to talk about is and have you guys heard about what's been going on with the Twitter censorship? Over
I've
the last
heard
couple of
about it.
days?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Yeah. Ferro, have you heard anything about the Twitter censorship going on?
Yes, of course. I was there live when it started to happen last night. I can say I was
Yeah.
there for the great censorship wars.
Same. And can I just ask, because I mean, you two were both on Twitter, and
Yeah.
so am I, obviously. Were you affected by it?
Yeah, I had well, how do I explain it? Because I can't really prove it. But when all this was going down, and they were getting rid of people's tweets and locking people's accounts for Biden memes and jokes, suddenly the site went down, because then it was discovered that they were essentially almost breaking the law by interfering when they locked the one of the Trump accounts. What was it? The campaign account? I can't remember what it was.
It was the official Trump re-election campaign account.
Yeah, and then suddenly everything went down. So I guess that can't have been a coincidence. That's how I think I was affected, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I retweeted the New York Post article on Hunter Biden and his Ukrainian dealings, because I heard that people who retweeted it, the links wouldn't work, and I just thought I'll just try it out. I retweeted it, and then lo and behold, the link didn't work. I then went off and I went back on, and again, I was my account had been. I don't think it was suspended, but it wasn't loading tweets. It wasn't. I wasn't able to send anything. I could still view everything and like, but I couldn't send tweets or anything. And that lasted for about a couple of hours, and then it sort of lifted. And then I noticed that one of my tweets that I sent had disappeared completely. So again, that's never happened. And so, Farah, how did you experience this great Twitter censorship battle as you were present on the front lines as well?
Yeah, well, it was similar to that. Really, what I think was interesting really was again the kind of initial. Oh, it sort of escalated through the whole day. They started by blocking the URL, then they started banning accounts, then they took down the site. There was this full escalation. There's a couple of things I want to flag up. First is the connection between Twitter and Facebook. Both Twitter and Facebook started blocking the links at the same time. I think in my mind it's clear that there is some kind of regular meeting within their trust and safety teams, or again some kind, like I've worked at several big corporates. I think it's inevitable that they will have maybe even like a collaborative steering group where they agree to ban certain terms. So we have this kind of escalation angle. We've got this collaboration angle, but I think fundamentally this is about denying the truth and election gerrymandering of the worst kind. There is really no excuse for this whatsoever. There is like all the reasons I've seen are pathetic and weak from Twitter. Jack did a follow-up email, which was kind of like a pseudo. It wasn't even really apology for what he did, just more like, oh, we should have not as been as harsh, but we still should have censored it. In my mind, this has solidified the idea that big tech needs to ultimately be destroyed at all costs. I'm very pro-market in my in my economic view. So that, again, this goes very much against it. But the cultural and political power that these companies have is ridiculously strong. They are collaborating together to manipulate on a mass scale national elections. Now, thank goodness this was happening in America, is what I'd say, because America is one of the few places in the world that can stand up to this technocracy. Just imagine somewhere like Belarus or Bulgaria. There are probably manipulations and changes in the algorithm that aren't even being noticed and aren't even being challenged, that are going on under the radar. So goodness knows what's even happening with that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also worth pointing out, because I just brought up this article by the Intercept, which is Glenn Greenwald, who also pointed out that while this happened on Twitter, this also happened and is continuing on Facebook. And one of the people who is leading up for Facebook, that is, the election campaign fact checkers, and making sure that quote unquote fake news isn't being projected out to the public, is none other than our very own Nick Clegg, former leader of the Liberal Democrats, who has got this position out in Silicon Valley, working for Facebook to monitor tweets and make sure that none of them break Facebook's own rules. Now, again, this goes back to what many have said, and it's from what I can see, and I can't. I mean, this is Facebook example, but also with Twitter, it does. There's been. I think there's been proof from this, but from like the various Project Veritas videos and such. But it definitely looks like that there is a large group of activists who lean in a certain political direction, who are not treating it as a business in a sense, but treating it as a vehicle to push their own political aims. So when it comes to Twitter, for example, I think the problem with Jack Dorsey is I don't think he's in control of Twitter anymore. He can't, without sacking a good portion of his team in Silicon Valley, because I think the problem he's got is that they are all on the radical left Democrats.
You're assuming he's not on their side.
Yeah, and I think the problem that he's got is he knows what they're doing it will be considered election interfering, but at the same time, he can't exactly sack them all in one go.
Yes, he can. I'm going to jump in there and say, totally disagree with you. Just if, for example, if you're in charge of a team of people and you know that, say, for example, 2 out of the 10 of your team are like doing illicit activity, maybe they're embezzling from the company. If you know that's happening, and you don't do anything about it, in my mind, you're complicit in their crimes. And then the same, I mean, I really do not buy into this. Jack can't sack people. CEOs have total power in their business. If they wanted it enough, he would do it. I think you're right. There would be political consequences. That the kind of left Twitter would scream and shout. But if he wanted to enough, he could definitely do it, 100%. But
I'd say that he can't sack people for the very simple reason that the next lot that would come in would be still from the same political persuasion.
Well, then it's up to him to scout their social medias, which every company does nowadays, to determine what politics they have.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, but
all I'm saying is, why can't you say, for example, if there's 12 trust and safety officers, why can't you find out the ideologies behind them? You just simply ask them, just like a political compass, and get a mix of people from the left and the right. I'm not even asking to stuff it full of right wingers. I just want balance and transparency, and those are the 2 things we're not got. These guys are like the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984. They have the power. They have literally the power to change history. Literally the power to change ideas, and they're anonymous.
They don't have the power to change history, but maybe in terms of influencing people's opinions.
On a second. But on a second, the typical person on the street who doesn't know that much. He's got a Twitter account and he follows a celebrity, and the celebrity's tweeting out something. It is literally changing their worldview and how they see political events. Most people don't even know how much of a creep Biden is, because they're totally.
Well, you're assuming that they just take this information and don't even think about it, which people do.
I mean, I'm not sure. I personally
not as deep as was what we artists would do, but they do think. And then they try to rationalize.
People are stubborn though. Like if you went up and said to a Democrat, okay, look at all these videos of Joe Biden sniffing girls' hair, and then him at that
ideologues, they don't care.
Yeah, that recent rally, the recent rally where he said that I want those girls when they get older. Well, I want them to I want to see them or something when they get older. That sort of stuff, like real creepy stuff. If you showed that to your average low information Democrat, far left Democrat on Twitter, they would consume that information, but they would then dismiss it outright.
Yeah, because they're ideological. They have to. They're ideological. They have to reason it away, because if they don't, then that undermines their position.
I guess my point is
ideologues. That's what ideologues do. That's what people in cults do. I could have shown Scientologists similar things with a lot of what they believe, but they're going to just rationalize it away and call me whatever it is they call people like us who don't like it. So.
But most of the people wouldn't have even seen the Biden hair sniffing. I mean, I speak to a lot of left-wing people in London. They don't even know it went on. They don't know if there's any kind of allegations against Biden. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say about you need to understand that people get their view of the facts, and
Yeah, I know. I understand this. I've been doing this for a very long time. Yeah. I understand, but I don't think the normal people are just vessels that we just dunk a lot of stuff on. It's much more complicated than that.
I think if
that were the case, then a lot of the current political events that have happened would not have happened. Yeah. Ideologues may be like that, but
that's
people,
not so. You have the two ideologues on both sides, and then you have, let's say, the normal people. But the normal people tend to be the low information voter, and I think where Ferro is getting at here is that the low information voter will pick out the first bit of information that appears in front of them, and so I think what it is because the dominance of the way that Twitter has been protecting Biden, protecting the radical left, but also not being consistent with their policies, because we know do you remember the whole the stories about that was in Vice and about Trump urinating on prostitutes or whatever the hell that was. Now that was by their own standards, that is there was no was it valid sources to the story, and by their own standards it would not be it would at least come with a warning, the story, but obviously with the Hunter Biden stuff, that's if they applied the same standards, then that should be allowed, but of course they didn't, and so that's the one now been sort of, because they can't say it's a conspiracy theory because there's too much evidence. I mean, for once, there's actually photo evidence of Hunter Biden from this hard. Because the story is, it came from this hard drive, didn't it? This, but I don't know how. Yeah. It was really Giuliani who got hand of this.
It was a guy who was tasked with fixing his laptop or something, and he just discovered them and he gave it to them. Apparently, he was a Trump supporter. That's what I saw. Some account posted that said this story is crumbling because he happened to be one. It's like, no, that doesn't make it crumble. It certainly gives us a motive for why this guy did what he did, why he leaked it, but it doesn't make the story any less credible.
I think there's something I want to bring up about that hypocrisy, and I think this is something that right wingers need to get over the fact, and it's kind of like, they don't play fair. They put in a set of rules which, by objective standards, like you said, they should have done something for urination article, let's just call it, versus the Hunter Biden. But they don't care. What they're doing is they're playing to win, and there's literally no point in us saying, you're being hypocrites, or you're not playing by the rules. They're just stamping on our face, and we're saying, why are you playing dirty? In my mind, they just need to be like the whole of Twitter needs to be crushed. I think what this has also shown is just Trump's impotence, because he's had his tweets removed, deleted, accounts suspended. I mean, he's been publicly humiliated, and he's meant to be the most powerful person in the world. And what this has shown is that he can't even maintain a basic level. Like, it's not even he's saying nothing radical by any means, and he is being totally stopped in saying that. But like, does he even have the power to stop Twitter from doing that? In my mind, he's just totally impotent in this regard.
Yeah, I mean,
he just doesn't have the will. That's the difference.
No, well, apparently, was it Article 230 or something like that that was over the whole sort of big tech bill, which he had the chance in his first 2 years or something, when he had control of the Congress and Senate and such. They had the chance to deal with it then, and the ironic thing is, if he actually did deal with it when he first came in, it probably wouldn't have happened. This probably wouldn't have happened now, but of course he didn't. I think it's also worth pointing out something which is many have been pointing out as well from our side, is that the attempt to hide the Hunter Biden story and the Biden story, because the story itself isn't just around Hunter Biden smoking a crack pipe. It's also around the fact that Joe Biden got supposedly, because none of this has been proven, so we have to say supposedly, the evidence that was presented suggests that he knew about this energy deal with Ukraine, and that's why he wanted, while he was VP, to relax rules between the two nations, and in the process, he got somebody in Ukraine fired from the board position, who was causing problems. I don't know the full, because this is all in emails, but from what I can see, it does appear that his original comment saying I had nothing to do with this board, which was what Hunter Biden was on, obviously doesn't seem to be true, because he met with the Ukrainian men in question who were part of this company, and there's actually photos of them all together. So this is why I said it's not a conspiracy. So hence, Twitter went along the route of just burying the story and then shutting accounts. But the interesting thing is that it's incredibly backfired, because the story it hasn't been buried. In fact, the story is now being projected even further. But the new story is what we have in front of here, is basically Facebook and Twitter cross a line far more dangerous than what they censor. And so, it doesn't look like they've been successful in any way in censoring. In fact, it's actually had one heck of a blowback in their face. And it's interesting because it does show that, let's say the Moldberg term cathedral, it does show the cathedral is not all powerful as we think it might be, and as they think it might be, because I guess there is a certain point where there is a truth which cannot be hidden. It just can't be hidden out or pushed down, because it's self-evident, with the photos and everything else, because the photos were circulating around Twitter all day. So I don't know what you two make of that.
You go.
I don't know what to make of it.
I mean, do you think they have? What do you think that they are more likely to do something like this in the future, like burying stories?
Well, they do it already. If they've done it before, they've done it now. They'll do it again. What is there to say? You know.
I guess the one thing is that, like you said, this has fundamentally failed, and I think there's two reasons why. They've gone in much harder than they would usually do. Now, I think we've all suspected things like, we've all noticed certain hashtags disappearing in the past. We've all seen, heard rumors or felt like certain subscribers have been, certain YouTube channels have been taken out of the algorithm, certain pages. That is a very subtle and effective form of censorship, because you're always thinking, am I just imagining this? I'm just one guy, can never verify it, right? When you have a level of censorship where you're blocking a URL, and that's happening to multiple people, it's really obvious it's happening, and that gets shared around more. So they've gone from this, in my mind, subtle and effective. It's kind of like just gently nudging the ship in a certain direction. With this, they're out in the open. They're blatantly doing something, and I think the reason why they've had to do it is that just the panic levels. The material in question is just so explosive, because I don't know much about American history, but it seems to me that this is the first time where the Democrats are leading with an openly corrupt politician. Even Clinton at his worst still is like literally nothing on someone who's constantly lied and doing these kind of ridiculously shady deals. So they've had to. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Sorry.
Or Wilson. Although not necessarily corrupt, but maybe morally bankrupt.
Yeah, Kennedy was quite corrupt as well. I mean, he did like ballot harvesting, allegedly, but possibly when he was he a senator before? I think when he was a senator. This was JFK. I mean, the Kennedy family in general is quite corrupt.
Yeah, that's to do with the mafia, I think, in many of these situations. I think.
Yeah, Joe Kennedy. Yeah, he had links.
But I guess this stuff is so explosive because it's kind of like this is like the smoking gun showing that the Democratic candidate is just basically an absolute fraud, and there's just no way that he should get a single vote, essentially. And I think that's why they've had to really go masks off, showing the level of censorship. Now I think because of all of that network effect, because of the Streisand effect, it's then massively blown in their faces. And I think all that's going to happen is Jack does his semi-apology, Trump does nothing. He's not going to stop Twitter from doing anything, and they just go back to nudging the ship, and ultimately nothing will change.
In this situation, why interrupt your enemy when he's making the mistake?
Yeah, that's true to a degree, but it's like I would rather they wouldn't censor anything at all in the first place.
True.
Yeah. After this election, if he wins, Trump's in a position to exact righteous vengeance. So, I mean, I don't know if he will. I doubt it, but he would be more than justified, and he'd have the backing of the people.
Yes, I think he would. And this goes back to, I mean, obviously this is important. This is an election year, and we've got the election coming up in a couple of weeks now. So I guess my question would be, this is something else I thought about the censorship and why they probably went in hard. Not so just much because it's smoking gun, because, I mean, the amount of times I heard over like the last 4 years with Trump and Russia and the Pissgate and everything else, smoking gun of this and smoking gun of that, because it's quite an overused term at the moment, especially in American politics. I was just wondering, because the opinion polling, I've been doing some look at some numbers coming out of certain battleground states like in Florida and Ohio and such, in Wisconsin, And one thing that I've noticed, which the Democracy Institute also pointed out, is the only way Biden can get those numbers is that if he has a higher turnout than Hillary Clinton had at the last election, which is a massive gamble for him. And I'm just wondering, do you guys, I'll put this to you, do you guys think that this was done, that Twitter's method, the reason why Twitter did this was because the Biden campaign opinion polling isn't as rosy as it's made out to be? In fact, it's actually very close, or it's not, it's in a really bad position compared to Trump. And so this is why Twitter took the action it did in a very hard form, because this probably would have been the final nail in the Biden campaign's coffin.
Well, I would say first and foremost, polls do not exist to inform; they exist to create opinion.
Yes, Peter Hitchens, and he
said that, and not just Peter Hitchens.
I know many others have said, and yeah, it's right. It is used to.
I'm not entirely finished with my point.
Yeah,
we don't actually know, because on one hand we have people who are considered the silent majority, and they don't like being honest when being polled, which is why we saw before the election Brexit, a lot of people assumed Remain was going to win. Weren't the polls saying similar things? And then in the last election, it showed that Clinton was going to win. It depends. Either it was going to be a close Clinton victory to solid victory to landslide. And then we saw with some of the recent British elections, a lot of the left thought that they were going to win. And some of the polls seem to reflect that, or something close between the two. But actually, they got soundly beaten in two elections, and one they would have lost by a landslide had the manifesto from the Tories not been so terrible. But in each case, they've always been seemingly doing well in polling. But then also, you can probably find polls that show the opposite. Like there's Trump-friendly polls that I've seen, and I don't trust them as much as I trust the Democrat ones, or the mainstream ones anyway, quote unquote, because I don't know that. I don't know if they've just asked a random bunch of people in Florida, which is solidly red these days, who they're voting for, or maybe Texas. I don't know that, do I? And when you say that to people who are Biden supporters, they just go, "Oh, you're a truther. You're a poll truther. You don't believe in polls, which are so scientifically rigorous. How could they possibly be lying when they're actually not scientific?"
Yeah.
They're not. And we've had several examples of them failing. And as for the recent ones, again, we don't know. I can't say that we know. We don't. The only time we'll know is when they've counted each state during the night that they do it, and then we'll know who's won.
Yeah. That's the most important poll that's conducted on the day.
But if you ask people on the street, like there was somebody on Twitter who's from Philadelphia, he said that it's 90% Trump where he's been traveling, and that's meant to be a swing state. And I've noticed a lot of. It might be my bubble. I might be wrong. I don't know. I might be living in a bubble, but I don't see Biden campaigning really. Like, are the Democrats campaigning? No. I see Trump campaigning. He's going all over the place, and I see a lot of excitement and energy in his part. Or the Democrats are really not. They're the only person is my former co-host, and I love him dearly. Alcazar, he's the only Biden supporter with energy. The one memeing, really. I mean, actually, it's like Globe Twitter, and that's it. That's what they call it, the Globe Twitter, and that's it. It's not mainstream. They're not the mainstream of the Democratic Party, though. That's just a weird Twitter community. They're the only ones. Whereas you've got loads of people online who are pro-Trump, or not even pro-Trump, like libertarians who are sick of Joe Jorgensen and other sections of American political society, and they're voting for Trump. So, on the ground, I don't see how it could be a Biden victory. I in my opinion, I just don't see it.
No.
Well, if you say that, your eyes are lying. Okay, my eyes are lying then.
Well, I've noticed that a lot of the Biden supporters. I mean, I've been explored because I'm aware that I don't want to be in a bubble as well, and actually see like I wanted to. I've actually tried to go out and just like go on Twitter and go on Reddit and just try and find the Biden campaign, the people in the Biden fans and everything. And I mean, when it comes to campaigning material, like I think back to Clinton, it was the main focus was getting the first female in the White House, the first female president, and so that was quite a strong campaign image. And so you saw like what was it? It was like vote her and all that sort of stuff, broke the glass ceiling. That there was a lot of slogans, and I'm not seeing that with Biden. I can't really think of what slogan he has. And like when it comes to like merchandise, like hats and shirts, I'm not seeing it. And then when I go on like Reddit and sort of the Democrat left Twitter, I'm seeing them talking about, oh well, we're going to win Texas and we're going to win, we're going to win all the swing states, and then we're going to win Tennessee and everything. The latest one I've seen is them talk about winning Tennessee, and I'm just thinking to myself, these guys seem to be in one heck of a bubble. Because the problem is they actually they believe that 100% of the white population are going to vote Trump, or well, probably not 100%, but they think the majority are going to vote Trump. And then they think, but with the black and the Hispanic vote, they're all going to go to us, so it doesn't matter. So we're just going to win on pure demographic.
How's 20% populate? Well, not even 20. Like 20, something like that. How's that going to win you an election? 20%.
But they don't believe it's real. They think it's just they won't engage. I mean, I've raised that with them, and they won't engage with it. And they'll come out with some they'll come up with previous election results to prove that that's not happening, and then they'll come out with, I mean, especially with and this is the thing, because the Democracy Institute polling, and I'll talk about this at next week's show because we will be talking about more about polls, but I'll just put this out there first. Currently, Biden is polling at 76% with the African American vote. Now, while that might seem a lot, that's actually really bad. That's pretty disastrous. If the polling is correct, let's just say for a minute it is correct. That is really bad, because Clinton and Obama and sort of Democrats before usually get within the 90s%. I mean, I think Barack Obama was in his first term for the first election in 2008, 2009, was very. I mean, that was very high, high with 90, like 94, something like that. It was very, very high indeed. But if that polls to be correct, 76%, then that's really, really bad for Biden.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you guys. I think it seems unlikely that he's going to win with it, especially after all of this stuff. But just don't underestimate the power of the media and the power that CNN has over that low-informed voter.
Yeah.
We have all this apparent power, yet they failed to stop him winning the first time. I don't see how they can do it the second time. I really don't.
The question is, have they learned from their mistakes from the first tournament? I don't think they have. So that's what, because the problem is they would need to reach that. I mean, they couldn't predict the Trump voters in Pennsylvania. I think back. I mean, looking back at old clips, people were predicting that Ohio and such would be in play for Trump, but nobody was talking about Pennsylvania going to Trump. And the thing there is, the entire establishment over there and in this country as well, the media and political establishment didn't even see that coming. So there is a certain group in the United States, like a certain group of voter here in the UK, the shy Brexit voter, that were completely anonymous to the wider establishment. I mean, I think the only people who probably knew about them would have been Cambridge Analytica, who also, a side note, they've been found not guilty of misuse of data and everything, but that story hasn't been out there for some strange reason. I actually thought it was quite important because they were accused of all sorts of criminality, but they've been found not guilty.
I mean, we've also got to remember that literally all these massive poll numbers came randomly after a week. Like Trump was increasing his, I think his approval rating was increasing. So initially, Biden overtook his approval rating. So he was at about 40 something, 50 something, but he went consistently down, down, down. You can watch Sticks, X, and Hammer's videos, and you can see that Trump's was rising, rising, rising. And I've seen several peaks, and I think at most it's about 50, but I think it's probably going to be more like 46, 47. It was going up, and then, as you know, randomly out of the blue, after polling reasonably well in all these places, literally 2 weeks ago, now he's losing Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, of all places. Yeah. And you have to question that. Like, really? No, I don't think people can change their opinion in a week that quickly.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's not like he's losing by a couple percent. I mean, in some cases, it's like 7%.
13 points, 15 points, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And, I mean, just to put it in context, for him to be losing, let's just say that they are correct, that means a significant shift of the Trump voter from 2016 would have had to gone over to the Biden campaign. And again, I mean, have any of you two seen any evidence of Trump voters from 2016 saying, I'm voting Biden this time?
Well, apart from my co-host, that's it. Although he was too young to vote back then, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so he was too young to vote. I'm not counting Blob. I'm not counting Richard Spencer because he's an idiot.
Did he even vote? Did he even vote Trump? I don't know. I don't believe that.
I don't think he's. I think he just did it for a meme or something.
Did it for publicity?
Yeah, maybe he did it to discredit the Biden campaign. But then again, he is actually on the CNN. Is he on the CNN payroll?
Yes, he's a commentator. Yeah, CNN contributor.
So maybe his views do fit within CNN. Who knows? Allegedly, we don't know. But yeah, let's say next week I'm going to have Anakin Cringewalker, and Staff Sergeant Sniper on. So we'll be going through the poll numbers and the various battleground states then on Thursday. Not Thursday, Saturday even. So that should be quite interesting. And so the next story I thought we'll go on to is the David Starkey story, where he is now David Starkey is now under investigation by the Metropolitan Police. I know, Mitch, you've done a video on this, and I've seen your video on this, but
which one?
well, which one? Yeah, I'll say the latest one about David Starkey.
Yes.
Under investigation. I mean, I guess, Ferro, you remember this this supposed story. I say supposed story because to me it's a bit of a non-story, but it was Darren Grimes' podcast, and David Starkey appeared on that, and he, if I remember correctly, he said something. It was some radical leftist said that the slave trade was equivalent to a certain event that happened in Europe in the 40s, where a lot of 6 million died, and it referred to genocide. And obviously, David Starkey, being a reasonable individual and a very good historian, pointed out that this is no way comparable to genocide for two simple reasons. Number one, there wasn't a deliberate idea to kill and ethnically remove all these people because they still populate Africa, they still populate the Caribbean, And of course, this was, why would they pay rich African kings and warlords to then take these people and be and just to kill them and commit genocide? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, you also got to remember how he phrased it.
I'm
He
not
didn't say it like that.
Say the phrase.
I was just going to say I'm not going to use the term. I mean, hence why it's the title.
Well, how are we supposed to inform the people if we don't say what he said?
They will know how what he said. I mean, I think people would. I mean, you guys know what he said. Damned.
Would you want me, the mixed race person, to say it?
Well,
God, this is why you lot are losing. You just can't be brave enough to say it. All right, so this is what he said.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. There wouldn't be so many damn blacks in Africa and Britain now, would there? A lot of them survived. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's a quotation. That's a quotation, by the way. So that we're quoting what he said. And the trouble is, the reason we can't say it is normally.
I don't care.
Well, I don't want to end up in prison. I don't.
No, you'll be fine. Don't worry.
And but that's the thing. I mean, the police. Okay, so the police have investigating, and what are they investigating him for? Let's go into that. What's the investigation?
Right. So the investigation is mainly about Darren Grimes. Essentially, they're trying to say that because he was the interviewer and he allowed Starkey to say "damn," therefore he is liable for stirring racial hatred. He's liable for what Starkey said, even though he can't read Starkey's mind, and likewise Starkey can't read his mind to discern what questions he's going to be asked. And that's why they're investigating him. And then they also investigated Starkey afterwards. But he only got the email literally the day that we all found out.
Yeah. I was just trying to find. I'll go for the BBC again because that's the one they have to pay for.
To answer the Right Honourable Fez's question, it's not been shelved; it's been put on hold because of the backlash.
Yes.
While you bring it up, maybe I'll just talk through kind of what my thoughts on it. I mean, I think this whole story is, it's got several different phases to it. In my mind, the initial phase, just generally disappointed with the right wing and how quickly they were to, or again, how the typical normal conservative voter, how quick he was to abandon such an illustrious and erudite professor as Starkey. Didn't give him a chance even to apologise. Just immediately dropped him, unpersoned him for what in my mind was not a particularly egregious sentence when placed in the context. I can understand people's concerns and he apologised for that. But this really is, in some ways, it's good because it's kind of identified all the wets instantly, all the people that in my mind I don't want to associate with anymore. Even Grimes himself, who I would consider to be nothing more than an intellectual coward and a social climber, desperate for any kind of attention. This backfired on him. I mean, regarding the police stuff, obviously, it's just a continuation of. This is the inevitable conclusion of the hate crime laws and the position that the police is having in controlling the way we talk about things. Apart from it's not our side that's controlling. Just like the trust and safety team, there's a group of 20, 30 officers, all university trained, or they've all been to the kind of diversity training, etc. All on the side of the left, and they're going to continue to stamp on us. Basically, this is just marking a new chapter in the restrictions in discussion and free speech.
Are you ready for something really controversial?
Well, go
I've already said it. You've already heard the video, but Darren Grimes deserves it. Not in a legal sense, not in a can't think of any other similar thing to legal terms, but in a karmic, I don't want to say moral sense, because that also implies that censorship's all right, but in in the true sense of the word, as in whatever you do will have ramifications in the future, be they positive or negative. He deserves that because he's the one, as I said in the video, who courted the censors. He took their side. He threw Starkey under the bus to save his own skin, and now they've come for him. And this is what happens time and time again. We've all heard the poem of, at first I didn't save the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
and then eventually they came for me, but there was no one to save me. That's what's happened. And look at all the wets. They've all come out and said, Darren Grimes doesn't deserve this. It was Starkey's fault for saying the word damn. And it's like, no, he does deserve it, because this is a man who's proven that he has no principles that he would like to stand on and to defend and uphold. He's either a coward, weak, or has no principles whatsoever. He's a social climber like a lot of them.
Yeah.
Or a mix of all of it. I don't know. But he deserves exactly what he's getting. And why does he? I mean, I would be willing to help him to solve all these things out, because I know that it would come for me next, and you guys and everybody else. But I don't blame other people for deciding to wash their hands, pilot style, and be like, no.
No. And the only good thing is David Starkey, while he points out here. I did not intend to stir up racial hatred, and there was nothing about the circumstance of the broadcast which made it to do so. But he says, I apologized unreservedly for the words used, and I used it again today. It was serious error for which I have significantly paid. But he says he didn't. He didn't stir up racial hatred, and he would defend himself quite openly, which again, and the thing is, you have to remember, he has lost. I mean, he's lost he's lost his
book deal. He's lost several positions,
publication, his position at his university. He's lost his media, because remember he used to do really good documentaries on the Tudors, on the Civil War, on the England during the 17th century, for the likes of BBC and ITV and such. All of those now have gone, and effectively he's lost all means of the traditional media. I don't even know if he's even able to write articles anymore, because I imagine most of those, because a lot of the supposed quote-unquote right-wing papers also turned on him. The Times, Telegraph, I think even the Mail turned on him. So, yeah, he is... and this is what the frustrating bit with me, and I think Ferro pointed it out, that it's not like that it was basically just the lack of principles from the right, where it was basically they were saying, that it wasn't the fact that Darren Grimes was under investigation, and it was a massive misuse of power and a sort of lurch to authoritarianism. It wasn't anything to do with that. It was down to the fact that he didn't say it. It was Starkey who said it, so go after him, Mr. Police Officer. And it's mad, because it's it's definitely not the country that I grew up in. That's nowhere near that. And it shows that.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm in my late 20s now. So
same age as I don't know if you're the same age. You're in the same age range as me.
Yeah, same age range. Yeah, and
there's examples of this even when we were kids, to be fair, or at least teenagers. This has been going on for a long time. I remember when I was a kid, the push to gender neutralize language, which worked. Nobody ever mentions that anymore, and the damages. In fact, I've been like a victim of that. Do you want me to get into? Actually, I don't know if that's even relevant to the conversation, but it's a funny story.
So if you say, we'll go into that.
But this shit's been going on for years, guys. All right, a lot, and I've noticed that a lot of people have only just woken up because of 2016. Oh, it's 2016, isn't it? It's either that or a little while later. And I just wonder, where were you guys? Like, did you not see it right before your very eyes?
I didn't wake up to it till 2016. To be fair, well, I mean, technically, I guess you could say 2015 because I was watching. I mean, I sort of started watching Sargon videos. I think about 2015. So I probably
I was a year before you. Yeah.
yeah.
But even
So
in 2013, I'd already had some experiences, shall we say?
yeah, I mean, the trouble is, I just didn't know. I guess I didn't know too much about it. I mean, also, I mean, this is the thing you have to remember. Like the media, 10 years ago, wasn't filled with the, well, I guess they would say woke progressives. I mean, they were filled with lefty, but they weren't exactly filled with the woke leftist brigade. I mean, you think about Top Gear 10 years ago. I mean,
Top Gear's always been an outlier, though. That's the thing. But by and large, the BBC, the left-wing media in particular, they've always been staffed with these people. They've always been there. It's just that slowly and surely they've been able to be open about more and more with what they want to do because they've prepped everybody for it. That's it.
yeah, I mean, they've been more open about it.
Yeah, one thing I would say is that this is definitely the kind of biggest scalp in the most recent time that they've managed to claim. You know, I don't even think Starkey is that radical in his views. You know, he's a gay man. Yeah, exactly. He's a boomer with like Thatcherite views, or you know.
I wouldn't say he's a Thatcherite. I don't think that's true.
Okay, like not. I know I call him centre right or whatever. I don't think he's particularly that outrageous, but what he does symbolise is he's a celebrity and a political figure that didn't step into line with everyone else, and he needs to be crushed. And so, you know, they were given this small opportunity, and then he was absolutely obliterated. And I think all that we're going to see now is the continuation of you know, celebrities that step out of line from the kind of left-wing narrative.
They've had plenty of opportunities, though, over the past decade to do so. But why that one, where he said things that are probably more damaging to them? That's really nothing.
But I think you're right in the sense that number one, they've now accrued enough power and captured the like I felt in the past the Met was something that was again, you know, the police traditionally has been a more right-wing institution, certainly socially, but through their kind of fast-track schemes, especially the kind of London police, has been a fully captured institution and you know, weaponized against any kind of right-wing thought, effectively. So I think it's
been weaponized for decades. This has been going on for years.
But not in the same way. Not in the same way. Like, has there been anyone like Starkey removed in a similar way during those decades?
No.
For example, there was that scientist a few years ago. He made a joke in a lecture. I forgot his name. It's someone famous. Was it Phil something? What was he called? Oh, with
the colourful shirt or something.
Well, there was him. There was that guy who landed the probe on the planet, but that was another thing that's separate. It was somebody, an older one, really famous. Wait, let me just look this up. I need to look this up.
What is he? I guess, from my opinion, these are people who are essentially.
Tim Hunt, that's it. Tim Hunt. He was cancelled before it was called cancelling in 2015.
These are just small timers. They're small timers.
Well, he's not a small timer. He's a massive, kind of physicist.
Tactic that they used at the time. It was basically
the same. Yeah.
Radical left-wing publication would write up a story saying, "Look what this guy said," and then it would be the journalists active on the radical papers who would write in and basically strong arm the government of the day, which was probably the coalition or something, and then they would and sort of complain. I'm just thinking with Toby Young, that was a key example of when he was cancelled for something along about eugenics or attending a eugenics conference or something. but I mean, I do think that their tactics are definitely widened since over the last 10 years. I mean, I noticed that you got the Twitter mob, for example, so they have greater numbers. They don't have to rely on like individual journalists and papers and publishers to stoke up methods of cancelling people. But I do think that I do think the tactics has widened to different areas. And when it comes to the police, though, I mean, I'm just thinking like there was a borough commander for Southwark back in like 2009, 2010, and he was quite right wing. I mean, well, from today's standard, because he's done several interviews on like Black Lives Matter and such. But there was a documentary that was done. I think it was like it was one of the Sky documentaries, but back at that time, and it showed their method of policing, especially when it comes to gangs and such. And you see the police back then, they were definitely not politically correct. They didn't. They definitely weren't part of any. They didn't take part in any sort of unconscious bias training or anything like that. I mean, they probably were where the police should be.
Well, I think the police angles. This is why I think it's an escalation, because they're using the same kind of powers that would have been reserved for like actual Nazis in the past. Like I said, in my mind, a relatively centrist figure, and like it's very, very worrying. Even with this kind of like Grimes not being affected, them shelving it, it just shows that number one, the power that they have, the fact that the government isn't intervening to what in my mind they need to do, which is a total root and branch recreation of the Met, and to actually like do protections. I just want to give a nice contrast to this, and that's the on the left wing, and that's the COVID spreading SNP member. This is someone who who knowingly infected other people with COVID. Yeah, exactly. And effectively did not only not receive a fine from the police, did not have any consequences. Literally, the police, there is an imbalance in justice now, which always leans on the right wing. Why was this woman not affected? Why was she not?
I mean, neither was Dominic Cummings or any of the others. They weren't fined for anything that they did that could be considered.
That was before, wasn't that before the? Anyway, I don't know.
During lockdown and things like that, even one of their own scientific advice. Well, he resigned and he didn't get fired. He broke lockdown to have sex.
To be fair though, with Dominic Cummings, there was a few important differences. Number one, he wasn't tested, and there is no way of proving he had COVID. With Margaret Ferrier, she admitted, and there is unrefutable evidence that she had COVID and knowingly travelled on a train, and then when she suspected she had COVID the day before, she went about her constituency to a church and a supermarket and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, I think.
But they banned long distance travels.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
It was still kind of breaking the rules, But the people who make the rules get to break them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But just going back to this fine thing though, because was the fine in place during Cummings' time?
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we now have were in place, like the long distance travel ban. There was another person who did it. There was a smaller MP. I forgot his name. He was definitely. Might have been no, not SNP. It was either Labour or Tory, but they were all at it. All the MPs were at it, and advisors were flaunting the rules of all the parties. They were all doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to I mean, this is where I take from the Margaret Farrier story of because
I mean, hers is the worst. Don't get me wrong. You know,
well, yeah,
that's
I mean, this say what you want with Dominic Cummings. I mean, I would agree that it would have been unforgivable if he. I mean, he went in a car, so it was his own car. She was on public transport with COVID.
But that's the thing. Even if you go in your own car, you're still not allowed to long distance travel, which is
No, you're not.
silly.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying that if you have, let's say you did have COVID and you were traveling, it's better to be in your own car than on public transport.
True, but they don't care about that. They don't see a difference. At least in the law.
Well, no, they don't. I mean, obviously, I got the map up here. So she travelled from Glasgow, and she to London, and then this was the route down and back. So 350 miles both ways. And I guess my question would be, if it was a Conservative MP in Scotland who did this journey from Glasgow to London and then back, and had, let's just say, went along the same events, didn't feel well, he or she got down there, was tested, oh dear, and then went back. I mean, I think I know the. I mean, I know what I would think would happen to this Conservative MP, but I would reckon that particular Conservative MP would not just be fined. I reckon it would be full prosecution. And
I really don't think that would happen, considering there were Conservative MPs who did break the rules during lockdown and got away with it. I don't.
Yeah, but on this, yeah, but this, but the point is that there are different. Because number one, those that did break the lockdown rules, they weren't. I mean, from my knowledge, most of them didn't have COVID or COVID symptoms. They just broke the lockdown rules. But the difference is she knowingly, with COVID, travelled from London back to Glasgow, which is different from, let's just say, somebody earlier on in the pandemic just breaking the rules because they
breaking the rules is breaking the rules, regardless if you have it or not. Unfortunately,
but there is, well, okay, that's fine. But the reason why I'm saying this is different is she knowingly travelled with COVID, which is proven. There is no disputing it, and she was forced to.
We've already got precedents that they won't, even if you've got it. If you're an MP, if you're in a position of power, they don't care. You will get away with it. There is precedence.
Yeah, but
or a celebrity, they get away with it.
It doesn't matter because this is public perception. That's why I was saying the reason why why there was so much anger from her, and why her own party effectively chucked her under the, well, I say chucked her under the bus, but basically sort of subtly removed her and sort of removed anything their sort of association with her, the SNP that is, was because there was no containing the public mood. Because again, you go back to low information voter, they will quite easily forget Dominic Cummings and all the others who broke the lockdown rules, because in this case, as I said, she travelled with COVID, knowing she had COVID. It's not like she didn't know, from London to Glasgow. I mean that is massively different than any other the lockdown breaks, in my opinion, because that especially given the majority of the country believe that we should be locked down, we should have a second lockdown. Majority of the country apparently believe that.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, all I'm saying, let's just park this a second. What about with the protests in London, where BLM has continued to be allowed to get away with stuff? Then the No Mask gang instantly, brutally punished by the police. I mean, it's obvious that the police are, a left-wing force that is constantly putting pressure on us. Huh?
If it doesn't appear on Sky News or BBC News or ITV News, that doesn't happen in the low information voter's mind, and that's the sad truth about it. Yes, it happens. Of course, we know it happens, and even today at Marble Arch, you had this massive Islamic protest, and they were not social distancing. Half of them weren't wearing masks, and it was a complete joke. And there was like a black cabbie who was filming it all. We know this is going on, but at the same time, if you ask your average member of the public who is not politically engaged, they won't know, because they just don't know it's happening, because BBC aren't reporting on it. But of course, as we know, if there was a let's say a Brexit party or some other let's say right wing gathering in London tomorrow at Marble Arch, of course the main story would be, oh, they're not wearing masks, oh, they're not social distancing, and so it doesn't matter, because in the the public conscious, it didn't happen. But we know Black Lives Matter, this thing is going on. This is why, and I mean, I've noticed that there have been some commentators on the right, like Julie Hartley Brewer and such, who've been talking about it, but they don't hammer it enough. They don't hammer it home enough. But the problem is, if you went out now and you said to the average member of the public, "Oh, this is what's happening," I think most of them probably wouldn't believe you, or they'll probably say, or I mean, they just don't know. I mean, people in my workplace, I raised it a week ago, and a lot of them didn't know that it was happening. So I mean, take that for what you will, but I think, again, because the BBC have not been covering subsequent demos, and even when they did, when they had the Black Lives Matter incident in this country during the height of the lockdown, the narrative from COVID drastically shifted, because Labour Party and all the other left-wing parties in this country suddenly became pro Black Lives Matter and pro protesting on the streets during a pandemic. So it doesn't matter what they say.
I mean, again, like, they don't care. If they can justify breaking the rules, they will. And I would say, like, we don't. I would disagree that the average voters simply aren't aware of all these things, or the average person, because again, I think they are, because I've talked to people in my workplace, and they seem to be decently aware of stuff. They can't quite articulate in the way that people online who have too much spare time on their hands to get into nitty gritty can express it. But I think a lot of them do. And I work in retail, and I overhear conversations all the time, and people talk about it constantly. And you got to bear in mind that it's not just the BBC and Sky News and all that where people get information from. They have people on Twitter and on YouTube and on where else would it be? Facebook, that they watch, or they stumble onto, or are aware of things in their little circles that inform them. And I see people do that all the time. And I don't think it's fair to say that they're ignorant and they're ignorant. They don't know what's going on, because if they didn't, they won't be voting the way that they vote. That's just the fact of the matter. Well, I don't buy that. I don't buy that they're that misinformed, that they're just empty vessels that we have to mold into our own image. I just don't buy that.
Well, I was just saying, I don't think that I said that they know what Black Lives Matter is, and they know what the protests that have been going on. And I imagine when you had that 2 week, or when you had those protests, and where attitude changed from stay at home, protect granny, and it's like, oh no, go on the street and protest. I think the majority of the people saw the hypocrisy, especially from Labour's point of view, and of course many of them saw Black Lives Matter. I mean, the majority, I think, saw Black Lives Matter as a negative force, because most people know that it is it's just a vehicle for a communist movement.
But the BBC doesn't tell them that. So how did they know that? Sorry, you just said that these people are only informed by those sources, but how do they now know that all that is bad?
Well, the reason I was just going to go and say on the finish on my point there. The point what I was trying to suggest was this, that the continuation, because for them, in the mind of the I would say the average voter who is not fully politically engaged, they know about that 2 week period of protest where the lockdown rules were broken. But what I was saying was the Black Lives Matter and everything else has been continuing on. There's been continuing gatherings by Extinction Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, sometimes both. And what I was saying was that the while they are aware that it went on, they are not aware that it's still going on, from my experience at least. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, I think when it came to the information, where I think the majority got their information from was very fortunate. Number one, it was United States, because they were ahead of it with Black Lives Matter, and there was a lot of information on social media out there about the I guess the communist link, which then was picked up by the likes of Talk Radio, LBC Radio, and the commentators on there. But they haven't really talked about the continuing gatherings in London, even like today. I know it's not Black Lives Matter, but a Islamic gathering. It hasn't been highlighted, which it should be, because you would then say to Steve Khan, okay, you want to stop this tier 2, tier 3 going on in London. What are you going to do about this lot? And the thing is, I'm just not seeing that being enough.
People outside of London probably won't see it, but people within London will definitely see it on Twitter, because again, Twitter is kind of a weird thing. It's that you're in the bubble, in your own little bubbles. You'll get some international stuff that trends. Then if you're following a lot of people from London, you'll start seeing that stuff. So at least people in London will be aware of it, or at least in the outlying regions. But people up north, not so much. But I wasn't aware of it, and I'm not an average voter.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. When we come to the Black Lives Matter, demo, I think. Was there any? Because are you up in Manchester?
Yes.
Yeah.
Salford technically.
Yeah. Was there any Black Lives Matter demo?
There was about one or two, but they weren't as. There was no rioting. I would have seen that straight away, and I would have been down there with my camera. No, none. There was a march, and they seemed pretty densely packed. But other than that, I don't think it was that big, and both marches were done and dusted. They did do a bit of graffiti, but other than that, not as bad as Extinction Rebellion.
No. And did they target any statues up there at all? No,
although there was one person who works at University of Manchester. He tried to get Robert Peel's statue taken down, but he got no votes. No signatures, sorry, for his change.org petition.
Yeah. So, because that was the other thing linked to Black Lives Matter in this country was, of course, the Colston statue incident down here with me in the southwest. And Bristol was a unique case because Bristol has a long history of Antifa, like an Antifa branch operating within the city. So when I heard the news, I wasn't exactly surprised that. I knew of a Black Lives Matter demo going on. I didn't expect it to be. I guess to take down the statue in the way that they did, and have the police basically surrounding and sort of cheering them on while they did it. I think that was definitely. I think that definitely woke a lot of, I guess what you would say, the low information voter. It definitely woke them up, and they probably made them very, high information vote, high information. There were a lot of people that I know who weren't particularly political, but saw that and were very angry because that was a deliberate breach of the law.
I remember thinking just now when you were talking about Bristol, and then they have like a Antifa element, a long-standing one. I know they're here in Manchester, but you'd hardly ever hear about them and see them. But I know they're around because I've seen their stickers. But I think maybe the reason why they didn't go for any statues is maybe because Manchester has a history of being an anti-slavery city from very early on, and also the free trade thing with Cobden. Whether or not people know about it, it may be in their subculture. Like every city has a subculture, and a shared heritage. Maybe it's in there somewhere amongst these people, So they didn't go after any of the statues. I mean, it's telling that he was an academic, and an obscure one at that, who tried to get Robert Peel down. A Bury native, nonetheless. It's not in Manchester, but it's one of the satellite towns.
Yeah.
And nobody went to Peel Park in Salford and tried to get that renamed or anything like that. I think it's telling that in Bristol, where there is a history of, at least being in part of the trade. I mean, technically Manchester, it's cotton from the slave trade in America, but there was a famous moment during the Civil War where we had a cotton famine because we refused to buy cotton from the Confederacy. So,
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to Bristol, I think the Antifa, the Antifa branch, they predominantly operate outside some area in Bristol called Stokescroft, where they are quite prevalent. It's a very lefty area indeed. A lot of it's down to the universities there. You've got the two universities in Bristol. You've also got Bath, which is about 15-minute drive away, which you got the universities there as well. So it's quite definitely a university area, a lot of academics. It's a very media hub as well, for the BBC and such. You've got Natural History Unit and such there. It's very liberty arts area, I would describe it as. And of course, and Bristol, as you pointed out, it has a very deep-rooted history of slavery. I mean, the main St. Mary's Cathedral, underground there is, if you go there, you will see on the side of the cathedral what appears to be a cellar, but what it was used to keep slaves. And there's a pub there which was used by the slave traders, and then in Clifton Hills, the caves up there were used for storing slaves as well. So there is a deep-rooted bit of history of slavery there, and it also goes back to the Saxon period, where and before, where the I think it was Celts and other people were enslaved, and they were used as a slave port then. So it has a long history of it, but the thing is, modern Bristol was definitely, the most important figure in that was Edward Colston, because he was, I guess you would say he was sort of like the Elon Musk sort of his era. He was I think he must have been one of the wealthiest Britons of his time, he set up a lot of charitable funds and groups. It wasn't just theatres and in the arts, but it was also education and everything, and scholarship, and all these things. Even today, scholarship and such, just done away with because of this the cultural revolution that's gone on in Bristol. And it's I know people in Bristol. It's angered a lot of people in the sort of outer regions of Bristol who aren't part of the sort of, I say mini London bubble that goes on there. It's like a little mini London in many ways.
Over here, I think, although we vote for the wrong party too many times, in my opinion, and it's one of my main life goals to change about this place. I think Mancunians and our derivative brethren in the Greater Manchester area are too arrogant about our heritage. We have a saying, on the seventh day God created Manchester. They were too arrogant for that kind of stuff to ever truly take. I hope so. Although with the way we handled the attacks, I'd say our resolve is weakening. But luckily, none of that happened over here, because we just don't have the same history as a lot of the port towns. Because we weren't a port town. We have an inland port, but we don't use anymore. But we were never a slave town. We were just a cotton town that somehow made it big in the lottery of the world. So I guess that narrative can't really stand here. I don't know.
No, it can't.
That's to explain, because in London it happened, didn't it? But maybe that's just the nature of London being the epicenter of all things political here. I don't know.
I think Yeah, I mean, like the areas in London where the street names and the statues and came down. If you look at them, like I think it was like Tower Hamlets was one. Demographic. I mean, I don't want to go too deep in the demographics question, but the demographics of certain boroughs probably means there'll be little resistance to the little resistance to removal of statues and such. I mean, it was definitely strange in. It was definitely strange in Bristol, like after, because I was up in Bristol after it happened, and it was definitely strange atmosphere, because there was, I mean, I mean, in many ways, I don't want to sound like too dramatic about it, but it was like a sort of revolution in many ways, because it felt like they had set a new like a year zero in many ways. I mean, you go back to like the Maoist Chairman Mao's sort of the Cultural Revolution in China. It did it because the purpose of it wasn't just to get rid of the legacy of the true history of Bristol, but it was also they were so hell bent on recreating a new history, a new narrative for the city. And Sadiq Khan, in many of his wordings when it comes to this commission, is trying to do the same thing. It's about, you hear him say, we want to show off London, which is truly representative of the London today. And I mean, I've put on Twitter several times. I say it's domestic terrorism, because in cultural terrorism, because effectively that's what it is at the moment. It's I mean, it's amazing, and I mean, I don't know about London. I think when it comes to Bristol, I don't think. I mean, there's been some pushback there. There has been. I think one thing that did set in Bristol, which was quite dangerous, was that there was a mob who broke the law and they were rewarded by the local government, and that's something that has. I mean, there's been a mass. I've noticed that there's been, with even Somerset Police, there's been a massive pushback from them. There is a lot of people who do not trust them, who are really. I guess you could say demoralized about the police and have little to no respect for them now. And
can I just jump in on this point, because again I think this sort of ties into what we were saying saying beforehand, where again for a nation to survive and to function, you need to have trust in the establishment and trust in justice. Justice is super important, that you and I will have the same level of justice, and again I think people take and expect the higher ups to kind of push things a little bit, but I think we're reaching new points of kind of breakdown where different parts of the country deal out justice in a different way. So again, just like you said, the way that the police react in one part of the country is totally different to the other, and I think that I think we're seeing another interesting division around COVID as well. Did you see? Was it in Manchester today or yesterday where they wanted to go for the kind of heavier lockdown, and the mayor was just like, "No, I'm not going to do it."
No, he wants one. He wants one.
Oh, he wants one.
Yeah, he's been for ages. Andy Burnham's been saying, he literally, as soon as, do you remember when Bolton and a few other places went into further lockdown?
Yeah.
But other places were being eased a little while later. He was telling people to ignore the easing of the lockdown and to continue staying indoors and things like that. Don't go to work. Don't go out. Stay indoors. Only recently now, as he decided to come out and say, "Oh, now I'm against the lockdown and all that." It's pure about power and trying to get himself re-elected in the upcoming mayoral elections, whenever they are. Was it next year?
Yeah.
Don't trust a single word this guy says. He's Labour through and through, and he's a liar. He says anything that was good for Andy Burnham and the party, and that's it.
Yeah, he wants more money from the government.
He doesn't want a single thing of it.
Yeah, well,
he just wants Gibbs as well. That's what it is. It's Gibbs.
Yeah. But I think again that's what's also interesting is again just like how the regions are just pushing for more cash. They're pushing they're almost trying to have a bit of autonomy, and I think that's interesting. We've got this breakdown in national justice, and we've got this breakdown in authority. Where, but Boris, well, I don't know. I just saw the title on Daily Mail where he's threatening to override whatever and like sends people in to kind of fix Manchester, but the point is that I don't think I've ever seen so much kind of rebellious spirit within the kind of local regions as we have over the COVID stuff, and again I'm just like, how can in the long term our society?
Well, most of them all want the same thing.
A lot of this comes down to Blair's legacy of devolution. And the legacy, the concept, because the problem is, I explained to them, devolution is not localism. There is quite a clear distinction between the two. And the problem is, I mean, like take Wales for example. Now Wales has effectively shut the border with, I think it's mainly north, like with the northern part of England, the border with northern England, northern Wales has been shut. I mean, where I live, we can still hop across the border. I believe so, at least, because I live in the West Country. But so I think I can still travel. But it's the sort of up your region, Mitch, where they've where the border's now going to be put in place.
Not that I'd like to go there anytime soon.
No, well, it is. But the trouble is, effectively, I mean, as a sort of historian within me, I'm thinking back to the late Roman Empire, especially the western half, where you had the various legions and sort of the sort of legions demanding more gibs, effectively from the Roman government,
which they did need. It's not like now where they don't need the money, really. They did need the money because, well, they're the ones defending the borders from the invaders.
But like the Welsh First Minister, I mean, he's effectively declared himself warlord of Wales from where I'm sitting.
And well, yeah, like I think it hasn't got quite to that point yet, but like I do think it's like this we're going to see more of this. We're going to see like cities and counties having different levels of society and creating different tiers of society. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, as Fez says in the chat, Burnham wants money. He still wants a lockdown.
Yeah,
but he wants money. He's only against the lockdown, so he can get public support for his money. But he'd put us in lockdown if he had the power.
It's the same with Sadiq as well. You know, like he's been pushing for his additional cash. But I guess the point is, what happens when the money runs out? And like, I think we all realise that as much as we like to think about the infinite money pots that we're diving into, you know, I presume there's going to be an end at some point where we're going to have to finally pay for all of the money that we've borrowed. Yeah, and what happens then when these local divisions can't get their gibs anymore?
Well, I mean, there's going to have to be. Well, I know Boris says there's not going to be any more austerity, but I don't know how that's not going to be the way forward, because there's going to have to be some. Well, I don't know what they're going to. I don't know what the government's going to do, because I think our GDP is minus 22% or something like that. This is the worst crisis. I mean, it's worse than from one statistic I saw, it's worse within the definitely living memory, especially worse than what went on in the 70s. So because of the lockdown and such, so I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but it's going to have to. I mean, I personally, the way that I think like the Welsh Assembly needs to go, not for a pure ideological reason, but also from a financial reason. I just don't see how that sort of can be cost effective anymore. I do think, because one thing I've noticed, when you devolve so much power, then in many ways the position of UK government minister and prime minister becomes so devalued. It becomes almost like the monarch in many ways, just a figurehead. It has no real actual power, and that's the problem. Sometimes, I mean, sound too much like a status here, but I'm going to. Sometimes power does need certain aspects of power does need to be centralized in a way where the traditional role of prime minister has been.
Mm-hmm. It's just all political pandering, and not pandering. That's the wrong word. Posturing. That's all it is. It's posturing. And I don't know if there's necessarily a push for more localism as a byproduct from devolution necessarily. I just think it's just a tactic. I don't think this is going to turn England into some kind of devolved country itself. I just think it's the mayors angling for more money, and they want it. But by and large, nothing is changing. All we're going to get is more lockdowns, I reckon, because they've thrown all economic sense out of the window. And they know that all of this is bad for the public's health, even more so than just letting us have freedom of movement. But they're still doing it because now they're trapped. They've trapped themselves. They have to do this now. Because if they decide to change tactics, and that shows that they've failed, and they can't allow themselves to be shown as failures.
No. And the trouble is, there's also the political dimension where you can't have a situation where the Labour Party agrees with the Conservative Party on because the Conservative Party.
They've already shown as such. At least Starmer did recently, didn't he? They're not going to challenge certain rulings in Parliament.
Yeah. On COVID related, especially on the COVID related stuff. Yeah. And so there's always there's that tension. I mean, the tension within the Conservative Party, where let's say conservatives in the country who may not be members of the party, just people on the right who voted, let's say, last time for Boris, who feel that he's gone too radically to the left and he's enacting the next communist manifesto. And then you got on the left, you've got the I guess you could say the legacy of momentum, the Corbynites who feel that Keir Starmer has basically become a Tory and is working with the Tories, and they want him out as well. So yeah, I mean, it definitely seems that there is like a working together. I don't see it happening from either side, to be honest, successfully anyway. As well with Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson, that is. I mean, I can't say for like local mayors and such. Maybe there is like some form, because it's a bit local politics is a bit different. But yeah, I just don't see it happening successfully because of the membership, which is quite important for any party leader.
So is there anything else we were going to talk about? Was it the Blair White thing I wanted to talk about as well?
Yeah, but I was going to say yes, the Blair White. So
do you want me to explain what's gone on?
Yeah, could you explain what's going on with?
All right. So basically, for anybody living under a rock who might be watching this, Blair White is a very famous trans YouTuber. I don't want to call her an activist because she's not an SJW. She's not a leftist. She's not one of them. But she came up alongside the likes of Sargon and me, and who else around at the time? Lou Levi, V, all those people came out roughly the same time, rose up pretty much similar time. Although she's now bigger than Sargon and roughly equivalent to Shu. She's got to 1 million subscribers, but she's deviated from anti-SJW content and gone down more normie inroads. So she's been doing like makeup. Been involved in the makeup community and doing a lot of what they call commentary content, but she's also been doing the trans stuff as well. She was like, I wouldn't say like Rose of Dawn, but they cover the similar topics, and she was one of the first to do so. And recently she's made a video on the trans athletes question, which is, should people who are transitioning play in the divisions of the gender they're transitioning into, or should they play in the one that they used to play in? So should a man who's transitioning into a woman play in the women's division, or stay in the men's division? And this video was obviously her saying that they shouldn't be transitioning to the other division. They should stay in the one that they are, because there is an obvious physical difference between male athletes and female athletes, which would make competition unfair. And we've seen that in MMA, where a trans fighter, FTM, MTF, so that's male to female, literally broke somebody's skull. She survived, but then recently she got into controversy and was bragging about it. So not dealing with the most sane person either. But that stuff happens. And then recently Blair was making a video on that, and then she used somebody as an example of that. And I forgot their name, but they're a weightlifter. So it's not quite the same as football or martial arts. But again, that person does have a comparative advantage over how much they can lift. And she basically implied that this person wanted to transition to the other division, for women, and compete there and break records there, because they'd actually previously been a record breaker as a man. But the person actually doesn't want to do that. Quite the opposite. She wants to stay in the men's division and continue what she's doing. Although she says it's not for political reasons, it's just for personal reasons, or for like competition reasons. And Blair got into hot shit because the person not only made Instagram posts on this several times before Blair made the video, but also went to her in the comment section and said, "Hey, look, if you just came and talked to me, I would have told you my opinion, but you didn't. Instead, you showed this screenshot, you put me in the thumbnail," I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and implied that I want to compete with women, which is not the case. And they were very nice and dignified, and didn't say you were straight up lying. They said you're just misinforming people, which I think Blair was lying. And I get why she's against all this stuff, but did she have to lie about it? No. So that's what's happened. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this was because, in my opinion, it shows why you should be calling out your own side when they make a mistake. When people like Blair White make monumental cock-ups like this and get away and trying to get away with it, it's why you should always, because you've in a way you've got to police yourselves, because if you don't, practices like this become normal, and you end up like the SJWs, although they have to lie. But it keeps intellectual honesty, essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's the important thing. You have to. I think. Definitely criticize your own side when it's quite visible that they have done something wrong. And I think in this case, Blair White, she came out and she apologized, I believe, in this case. I think according to this article, she apologized.
Oh yeah, because she's been quiet for a few weeks.
Yeah, she's been quiet for a few weeks, and this is probably the start of the apology, because this article is relatively new. So she's she's apologized for making false claims about transgender bodybuilders. And the problem is, the reason why it's so, or why I think it has to be pointed out that effectively she probably has discredited herself now, because whatever she covers now in the future, that's always going to be hanging over her. It's like, well, you made up stories on this, and so that will be always hanging over. But also, if those people who genuinely have concerns, let's say, of male to female transgender people in, let's say, the MMA and everything, and fighting, where they are competing and they are like beating the shit out of women, biological women, those people who the people who appeared with Joe Rogan and such, who've talked about this, who have genuine concerns, because there is a point where you have to say that biological sex and everything is a real is a real thing, people. Quite evidently it's real. Whether it comes to the physical stature of the person. It's a real thing. But the problem is when when sort of a Blair Wright pulls something like this, she completely discredits all of it.
Yeah.
And so much damage has probably been done to that. And I think she knows it. I don't know why she had to lie about it though. That was because I've been looking into it as well. I don't know why she had to lie about it, because one would assume that she could have gone on an angle where there's actually some data behind it, or because there's been a lot of studies or people who have done research into it, at least some sort of level of research. So I don't know why she had to lie about it.
I think it's because I don't know, I'm not making excuses, but I have a reason to believe she's picked up some bad habits from the beauty community and the commentary community.
Is it a case of
they do lie a lot, so it could be that.
Because I know with especially mainstream media and some they need to be the first to put out a video on this, or need to be the first to put out something on this or tweet on this. And the bad habits is either lie, make up story, or nick the story from somebody else. So yeah,
I mean, the person that she covered, I think, is vaguely left, and certainly they were using language like genderqueer and stuff like that. Yeah. But they seem very reasonable nonetheless. So I don't understand why Blair did that, and she didn't even ask the person, what do you believe? And the person would have talked. Maybe she, again, I did think, well, maybe she didn't know that, which she probably didn't, but she didn't even try. How do you know if you don't try? I just, there's no excuse for it though at the end of the day, because now she's discredited a lot of these people. Now they're even more like turfs and liars to the trans activists than they were already. Imagine how much crap Rosa Dawn is going to get if she appears on a mainstream television again, and somebody brings up Blair Wright and says, well, how can I trust the words you say when your biggest ideological ally is a liar and a known one?
When your side is the liar, yeah.
Now, of course, we can bring up hundreds of thousands of their lies, but it doesn't really matter because they're the ones who have got the backing in the media and things like that.
This is why I'm not sure about this whole. Should we keep ourselves to the same standards?
We don't need to lie. That's the problem, which is why it needs to be called out.
No, it's more like should we care about being caught out in the same way that the SNP MP just didn't give a crap.
Well, they don't care because they have to. That's the thing. But we don't have to lie, and that's why we should care.
No, the thing is, I feel like I think morally and ethically you're correct, but I think functionally
it's wrong. What you're saying, functionally, we need to do it.
No. I think it's always going to be used as a tool against us until we step over it and say we're not bothered anymore. I think that's.
Well, then they'll just say, well, now you're just allowing people to lie knowingly.
Yeah, I don't want it to happen, but I think it is going to happen. Basically, it's more like I'm not wanting it, but I think it's sort of an inevitability because it's such a powerful tool where we're being held up to such a high level of standards. And even the smallest thing has been just used to bludgeon against us, and literally there's nothing they can do sticks to them. What's going to happen is that the people that will survive are the people that don't care. I think it's interesting to see some of the rhetoric that someone like Nick Fuentes has, where he's just like, I don't care. I just care about winning. And
I care about winning, but there's a certain amount of stuff that we can't let slide.
I know, but I think he basically just doesn't care. And
he has to lie as well because he's not on our side. Remember?
Well, I think you're going to see more people espouse those kind of similar views. Again, I think it's morally and ethically wrong, but the people that will survive will be the people that don't care effectively.
Well, I don't agree with that because again, we know that if you hold people to their own standards, at least the establishment or whatever, to their own standards constantly, it works as an activist technique. That's why Alinsky advocated it in his book.
Yeah, but I think
what they do to us constantly. which is why I think we need to.
You can't use the left's techniques against.
Yes, you can.
them.
Yes, you can. It works.
I don't think
there's
it
a
has
whole channel devoted to it, and he's done it. He's done it several times.
Why can't we even get an SNP MP fired?
Because it's Scotland. That's why. We can't because we're English. It's up to the Scottish people up there to do it. But they're not organised. None of us are organised in any particular way. Neither are we particularly trained in how to do these techniques, especially especially as good as they can.
And also, I joke about
you
this.
can say, like, who's doing this? Nobody's doing it because there's no organisation or even will. And I think there's a big contingent on our side who just want things to moan about. They don't actually want to do anything. They don't want that change, because if there's change, they've got nothing to moan about. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of people like that. It's the defeatist types. And there's a lot of people who think, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Yeah, we can. Alinsky even says his book was made for people that weren't necessarily of his own ideological stripe. So it can be done. And it has been done. So I don't see why we should get all mopey and woe is me about it. Sorry, I'm very much a warrior at this point. I'm
not mopey about it. I think just.
I'm not saying you are. Just a lot of people are.
There is because ultimately I'm a realist, and I think what's in the process of happening is we're holding ourselves to a certain account and a certain level of moral perfectionism.
Yeah, we hold ourselves, but not them.
Yes, but I think we tried to hold them to account, and they just say
no. You hold them to their own standards, not to ours.
But even then, I just feel like what happens when they say I don't care, because they don't care. I think it's something that we'll see.
They tried that in the '60s, the old establishment. It didn't work.
We'll see how it plays out. But I think I'm noticing a trend of more right wing figures effectively saying I don't care. And again, I think it gives, like, again, Trump sort of has that as well, that kind of non-stick attitude, and that does give him a certain power. But I think there is certainly a cost to it from a moral and ethical perspective. So
I think you have to realise. The problem is when I imagine, because I've never had this, but when I imagine if you are a commentator on the right and you say something like. Forget Starkey, for example, because that was the extreme case where the police are investigating. But let's just say, like, Lawrence Fox or someone like that, for example. When you say something, when he said something, what was it, on Question Time, and he had like this, it was basically, he sort of, it was something along, I think it was critical race theory, like some question or something, and it was around the time of Black Lives, well before Black Lives Matter even. It was like, someone said, as a woman of color and as a white man, I don't think we should be discussing. And he was like, "Oh, come on," and everything, and sort of very dismissive with her and everything, and said that and then he went on the line of woke politics and everything. He had a lot of pushback from that. He had a lot of the typical media types calling him a racist, coming out to defend the woman who was I think she was like a university. Story went away. It's still there and it's still cited, but he just doesn't care. But for some people on the right, there seems to be this real case where they think a couple of Guardian journalists and independent journalists and Novara Media and such who go after him or go after them, it's like the end of the world, and then they have to apologize, and then they have to do this and they have to do that, saying, please make this negative press stop. So I think it depends how people react to it. Because there are some people who I think are quite media savvy and just go, yeah, I don't care. And because they know that it's only certain people who are trying to come after them. But it can sometimes feel like it's a larger group than it really is.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think it's a real challenge, for me personally, because I think I want an age where people can apologise for the things they've done wrong. But I think there's an increasing incentive to not apologise for anything at
Never
all.
apologise.
Well,
I
again, ethically, I think, and personally, there are times where I feel like I should should apologise, but it's become such a point of weakness now that we're increasingly pushed in that to that degree. So again, it's something that I have a heavy heart, but I do agree from a realist perspective. You need to take that attitude to survive, basically.
Yeah. I say we've been going on for 2 hours and 20 minutes now, nearly. So, is there anything else that you two would like to discuss before we wrap it up?
Well, there was something that Gammon posted on Twitter, but I've forgotten what it was. What was it? Let's have a look. There was some breaking news. I think it was Gammon. I don't know if this is even worthy of talking about, but George Osborne's been lined up as the next BBC chairman.
Really? Oh God. Oh God. Okay. Well. Okay. R.I.P. BBC then.
I will say this though: people who go on about the BBC and all the stuff that's been going on. Well, you do know that we have to pay for this. No, you don't.
No, you don't have to pay for it. You cannot
stop paying for it, but they never do. Again, because they want something to complain about.
Yeah. And
especially certain people in a certain cabal, they don't seem to be doing what they preach to loads of other people, like voting with your wallet. They just keep on paying for this stuff like the boomers they are. I don't pay for it. You shouldn't pay for it.
No. Yeah, I mean, I pay for the license fee because I do watch. I mean, I watch ITV, so and I have Sky, so yeah, I have to pay for it as well.
You shouldn't.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. I do watch some BBC programs like Dad's Army. I watch Dad's Army. I think
you can watch that online. It's all online. It's all on Daily Motion. You don't need to. You don't need TV for any of this.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. I mean, to be honest, I have actually looked into ways to stop paying the license fee. I mean, it's strange because I don't know why, but I just don't. I don't end up doing it really. I say that like when they do something or they produce like a really ridiculous program or something, I just go, yeah, I'm going. Okay, that's it. I've had enough of the BBC. Time to stop paying the license fee, defund the BBC, and all that. I mean, personally, I do think the license fee should be abolished, or it should be decriminalised at least, and then sort of go along the line of abolishing it, because I don't think we should be paying. I mean, obviously, have to pay for it, but yeah. But that's the only good positive thing. You really don't have to pay for it.
A lot of people do that. They think in order to own a TV, you have to pay for it.
Yeah, if you go on the BBC website and if you try and find a way to stop paying for the license fee, they make the BBC make their website as difficult as possible to navigate it. To be fair,
there's another website where you can, I think.
Yeah,
there's a own website or something.
Yeah. Yeah, there are several websites and guides to like video guides as well to show you how to get there. But yeah, it's quite difficult to. But I mean, that George Osborne story, I wouldn't be. I mean, originally it was meant to be Charles Moore, wasn't it? Charles Moore. He was meant to, but he pulled out of the. Or he decided not to, for whatever reason. Yeah, I wouldn't have much. I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think. I don't think George Osborne has any sort of capability to run the likes of the BBC at all. I mean, if he was in there, he would be the chairman, but he would not be running it. It would be the people below him, like the sort of manager types who'd be running it, and he would just be there on the top, saying, "Oh yes," nodding and everything, and he'd be very easily manipulated by them, because he's quite a weak individual anyway.
It's like a very random name to put out there. It's probably just a journalist being journalists.
Yeah. I can only see it from one news source. I've just been looking it up, actually. I think it's the Telegraph are the only ones. So we need to wait and see, because when it's multiple journalists and news sites and everything, then you could say, oh, maybe there's something to it, but I can only see one. So yeah, I think we'll probably wrap it up here now, because it's getting a bit late now. Thank you, Mitch and Ferro, for coming on. I always ask my guests, is there any shilling you'd like to do for your channels?
Just subscribe to me, click on the bell, and watch my videos. That's all I ask.
Okay, and Ferro, would anything coming up with the Foundations podcasts that you like to share?
Foundations of Architecture podcast is live on Sunday this week. We're going to be talking about the High Gothic period of architecture. So just for those who don't know, we take you through different periods of architecture from, I like to think, a slightly traditional and right-wing perspective. So if you want to know more about your culture and your history, tune in. Just search for Foundations of Architecture podcast on YouTube.
I'll put both your channels in the description and the links below, along with the two Discord servers that Plantagenet operates as well. So please go check out those two channels and the Discord server. And finally, I obviously on Twitter, I promised UFOs, and I will give you UFOs.
Joss will be happy.
Yeah, Joss will be happy. Here is so I was in Midlands UFO. Here we go. Here is your UFO of the day. Spooky. A triangle, if you will.
I don't know if you can hear my soundboard, but I have a very, very good soundboard clip for this.
Oh, have you got it ready at hand?
I do. Hang on a sec. I have to type it in. Oh, damn it. Here we are. Can you hear this? Play the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was going to do a different one, which is, hang on. This one.
Ooh. Uh-oh. Spooky.
Yeah. So this is again UFO of the day. Triangle. Wands. And I mean that was what we did covered last week. So I imagine I might do like a weekly thing of just UFOs of the week. Just put that up there. What else? I'm on this channel on Thursday with Harry, and we're going to be covering the politics of the Witcher, and in particular the Nilfgaard Empire, which we'll be covering in that episode on Thursday, about 9 o'clock. So that should be good. I think the last one we did was sorry,
nerd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the last one we did was actually quite fun. It was on the Fallout New Vegas and Caesar's Legion. That was actually quite a fun one, because that was like me, and it was P-Man, me and Harry, and it was sort of we sort of just ended up talking about the virtues of slavery, unironically. But no, that was quite a fun one. So, but yeah, we should be quite fun one to do. And then of course next week we've got the Blob but we've got Anakin Cringe Walker and Sergeant Sniper. We're going to do an election special one. So That one should be quite good as well. But thank you both, Ferro.
Sorry, just before we leave, I've got
Yeah.
a question that I've not asked anybody. Do you ever get this channel promoted called Modern Wisdom?
Yeah, I've got
I've
that.
seen that. And I've watched one of his episodes, and I turned it off after a while because the guy's just a wet. That's all he is. I still get his channel recommended. I've tried to turn it off; it just will not work. I just don't see what the fuss is about YouTube. I don't like him. Sorry, just not any. Would anybody? If anybody gets the same thing, sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, that's all right. I've had that recommended as well, and I'm just is that Andrew Doyle?
I have no idea what his name is. It's this English guy, and he's just he's so annoying.
Yeah, I think I know who you mean. Yeah, I've seen a bit of the clips.
He somehow knows all my favorite YouTubers.
Yeah. No, I mean I
know them. I know some of them too, but like Jesus.
Yeah. I usually, when it comes, I do like what I watch a bit of The Spectator, but I mean they've started to piss me off a bit recently because they have some absolute bloody grifters to the hilt defending Biden.
Because Hoff Summers was doing that just today.
I know. I don't know what's gone on with them.
Well, she's never changed. She never claimed to be red pilled or anything like that.
No, I mean, they saw an opportunity.
Camille Paglia anyway, so.
No, I mean, it's like, well, this is Katie, what's her name? Katie Andrews for Spectator. Every time she claims to be a conservative, when it comes to elections, she always goes behind the radical left candidate. She said, "Oh, I voted for, I voted for Mitt Romney," and I was like, "Well, did you really? Because you were still, worshipping Obama's backside back then." So that's a big doubt right there.
X.
Yeah, X for doubt. But we'll leave it on that. So thank you both, Mitch and Farah, for coming on. And go check out their channels and check out the Discord links in the description below. And I will see you all next week.